Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the email. Okay, so this story starts out in 2011 when a man named Jack passed away quite suddenly. Of course, this meant that his friends and family began to grieve Jack and do all of the things that come with having someone close to you pass away. But 5 months after Jack's death, something really spooky happened. At this time, Jack's best friend, Tim Hart, received an email from Jack's account that just had the subject line, "I'm watching." Of course, Tim explains that he immediately went white like a ghost because what in the world? Of course, he opened the email and read it, and he said, quote, "It was very quick and short, but to a point that only Jack and I could relate on." Inside the email it said, quote, "Do you hear me? I'm at your house. Clean your effing attic." Shortly before Jack died, apparently the two had been in Tim's attic talking about what to do with the space. Exactly what happened with this email is the source of much mystery, as Jack's friends and family say that no one had his password and they don't think that the account was hacked. Tim asked Jack's mother about it as he thought maybe she had something to do with this mysterious email, but she just said, quote, "Think what you want about it or accept it as a gift."
Next up on our list, at number 9, we have phone calls after death. Let's go back to September 12, 2008, when a commuter train that was carrying 225 people collided with a freight train and crashed. 135 people were injured, 25 people unfortunately died. One of the people that lost their lives that day was 49-year-old Charles E. Peck. He had 3 children and he was engaged to his fiancée Andrea Katz. Well, once the crash was broadcasted, his fiancée was driving to the train station to pick him up with his parents and siblings. His body was recovered from the wreckage 12 hours after the incident, but for the first 11 hours his cell phone made several calls to his loved ones. It called his son, brother, stepmother, sister, and his fiancée. In total, his family received 35 phone calls that night, but when they answered, all they heard was static. When they tried to call back, it went straight to voicemail. It was later discovered that he had died on the impact, but long after he died, his cell phone somehow continued to reach out to his loved ones, almost saying like, "Hey, I'm okay." Maybe he was trying to reach out to them one last time beyond the grave. It's really scary and creepy when you think about it, but imagine just having that one more opportunity to listening to your loved ones that have passed away. So because of the phone calls, the rescue team was able to find his body, but they were never able to find his cell phone. I mean, what a creepy ending to that story. What happened to the cell phone? Who was making the phone calls? A warning message from beyond the grave takes us to number 8. On September 20th, 1988, a man received a very unexpected phone call. When he answered his cell, it was a familiar voice that sounded far away. She said, "Please be careful." He tried to ask who it was, but instead the ghostly voice repeated its warning 3 more times before hanging up. The phone number was unlisted, but he said that the voice sounded like his mother. But she had been dead for almost 2 years, so that's a big problem. 2 days after this scary phone call, he went to visit his father in a facility. The staff warned him that his father had become very violent, and maybe if he talked to him it would help his father. Well, once he got into the room, his father grabbed a knife from the drawer and tried to attack his son. If it wasn't for that phone call, he might not have been paranoid or acted as quickly as he did. Young boy sends his parents signals after death, and this takes us into number 7. Ray Dow Jr. was only 10 years old when he died in an accident while riding his bike. He took a sharp turn onto a steep hill, and that led him into a cemetery. His parents believe that their son is sending them signals that led them to know that he's okay and that he has come to terms with his death. Here are some of the signs. On the day that he died, his mom had took off one of his artworks from the fridge because she wanted to frame it. She placed it underneath another painting of Jesus Christ in the clouds, so the family believes that this was a premonition of his death. The family also says that when they visit the place where he died, they can feel his spirit. One day they brought flowers and a balloon to where he died, and a butterfly landed on the balloon and then moved to an angel statue. The family believes that he's communicating with them and he wants them to move on with their lives and be happy, and to let them know that he's okay. And now at number 6, we have a voice message from someone's grandpa. On April 12, 2011, a scary phone call was uploaded onto YouTube. The uploader claims that this is a ghostly phone message from his deceased grandpa who died a few months earlier. Let's have a listen.
Saved message.
Okay, if that's truly real, that's pretty freaky. Is anyone else completely freaked out? Because I am. The phone call only rang once, and the uploader said that he instantly got a voicemail notification. People in the comment section said they can also hear, love you, and help me. I mean, what do you guys hear? Grandmother attempts to call her grandson from beyond the grave, and this brings us to number 5. A musician by the name of Carl Uphoff claims that he was called by his grandmother who had died 2 days earlier. His grandmother was deaf, but she also called him on the phone to ask if he was even there, though she couldn't hear the answer. One night he got a call while he was hanging out with his friends. On the other end of the line, he said that he heard his grandmother's voice, and when he asked how she was able to call when she was dead, the woman hung up. Over the next several days, there was a ton more calls like this, and each time he asked her who she was or how she was able to call him. This went on for quite a bit until the call suddenly stopped. Haunted text messages climbs up onto this list at number 4. A man claims that his house is haunted by an evil poltergeist. Also claims that he is being haunted by text messages from his dead wife. There are reports that the poltergeist will pull their bed covers off while they sleep. The house had a terrible odor, and you can also feel something or someone breathing in your ears. If that wasn't enough to deal with, the man also claimed that his dead wife is haunting him through text messages. Just after she died, he got a missed phone call on his phone, but it didn't ring. The call was from the house phone, but there wasn't anyone home. So how can that be possible? Once he was inside, it smelled like cigarettes, which his wife used to smoke, and he could smell her perfume as if she was like right there. Since then, he had been getting messages which he believed are from his wife. He said that she always had her phone on her, and they even buried her with her phone. There had been messages with information that only his wife would have known, but there was no number. I mean, would you guys find this comforting or creepy? I mean, comforting in the sense of like, you're still able to communicate with your wife, but she's dead, but it's kind of creepy and scary. Up next, number 3, we have some mysterious emails sent from beyond the grave. Jack Folsey suddenly died at the age of 32 years old from a heart arrhythmia. But 5 months after he died, some of his loved ones started to receive mysterious emails from his account. These emails would mention private conversations that they had with him just before his death. So no one else could possibly have known what was said except for Jack. One of his closest friends said that he got an email notification from Jack. The message said, "Did you hear me? I'm at your house. Clean your effing attic." His friend said he turned ghost white because the two of them just had a conversation in his attic, and Jack had teased him about how messy and how dusty it was in there. No one else would have known about that conversation. Another one of his friends got a strange email from Jack about him breaking his ankle. This happened after Jack was dead. So I guess Jack is still watching over his friends, and he's still able to send them some comforting yet creepy emails. Number 2 brings us to a deceased grandma who was sending texts after death. I didn't know that grandmas were even capable of sending text messages. I mean, I just taught my dad how to send a few texts, and I shouldn't have done that because now he's texting me too much. All jokes aside, a woman is claiming that her grandmother is sending her text message after she died from cancer back in 2011. The granddaughter begged the cell phone company to not give away her grandmother's number, which they promised to do. But 3 years later, she was completely shocked when she looked down at her phone and saw a text from beyond the grave. A text from her grandmother. The message said, "I'm watching over you. You'll get through this. You'll be alright." She remembered that her grandmother was buried with her cell phone, so a lot of disturbing images ran through her head. What if she's there and texting in her grave? First she thought that someone might have dug up her grandmother's grave, got a hold of her cell phone, and now they're trolling. Or is it possible that her grandmother's spirit was able to text? And now topping this list, in at number 1, we have a daughter who sent her mother an apology after death. A teenager girl from New Mexico had a fight with her mother, and she left the house fueled with anger. Shortly after the fight, the teenager was involved in a devastating car crash. She was rushed to the hospital, but she was pronounced dead on arrival. A couple of hours after her death, her mother received a text message from her. It said, "Sorry mom, forgive me." I mean, that just gives me the chills. If that's in all honesty a true story, it's unbelievable, but it's scary. Oh, and did I mention that the crime scene was being cleaned up? They recovered her phone, but it was completely melted and destroyed, which makes this story even more freaky, because how was that text message even sent?
Starting off this countdown, we have the Cursed Grave. Located in Gippsland, Australia, or Gippsland, I'm sorry, there is a grave site inscribed with a curse. The grave belongs to James Mitchell, a man who died after falling down a mine shaft. His grave reads, and I quote, "Oh, let my sudden doom a warning be to all. Here while thou bendeth over thy tomb, thou may as quickly fall. If you say that curse out loud while at his grave, legend goes, you will unexpectedly die within the next couple of days."
In our number 9 spot today, we have the voicemail. This story comes from someone who goes by the username Midwayer, and they start off with some important backstory. They wrote, quote, "My grandmother lives alone in an old house that my mother and her 2 sisters grew up in. When they were children, the house was supposedly haunted by spirits. My mother was haunted by a voice that would call her name Judy from the bathroom, while her sister Gina would speak in tongues at times. It got to the point where they had a priest come in and cleanse the house. Other than a few odd occurrences, there was nothing too major, and it happened so long ago that it doesn't concern my family anymore." Okay, that's quite the backstory, but anyways, they continue on to say that one day they get a call from their mother asking if they were trying to prank her by leaving a creepy voicemail. She didn't, so she asks her mother who the last person who called her was, and they see the last 2 calls were from her grandmother. The grandmother also denied leaving any sort of message, so at this point no one has any idea who left the message or really where it came from. They then go on to explain the message, saying, quote, "The message was not staticky but seemed more glitchy, but there was a dominant low voice that seems to say my mother's name slowly, like Judy. It's 50 seconds long and it repeats. Every time I listen to it, I get shivers down my back." In our number 8 spot today, we have 2 years later. Cassie Woods is a woman who, in 2011, was completely freaked out when she received an email from her mother who had passed away 2 years prior. I mean, I can't even imagine the complete confusion that would bring for the first few seconds. Cassie explained that she was pretty hysterical when the email arrived. She said she saw it and just kind of collapsed to the floor. Unfortunately, the email would turn out to be one that was sent as a result of someone having hacked the email account that belonged to her late mother. Rather than a message from beyond the grave, this one turned out to be very from this realm. Has anything like this ever happened to you guys? In our number 7 spot today, we have The Call. This story is from someone who goes by the name Waits the Great, and they start off by explaining that their aunt passed away from some chronic illnesses that she had been struggling with. She then goes on to say, quote, "She was in her 50s and both of her parents outlived her. So one morning, around 7 a.m., my grandma, aunt's mother, gets a phone call. The caller ID said it was my aunt calling. When she was alive, that was the normal time for her to call almost every day. My grandma answered and could only hear static, but she stayed on the line repeating her daughter's name until the call was disconnected on the other side." Honestly, I don't know how this could have happened besides some sort of supernatural explanation. Maybe she just wanted one last phone call before she headed on her way. In our number 6 spot today, we have The Reply. So it's pretty common after someone passes away that their family continues to send text messages to the number that they once had. What's not common, however, is to receive a reply. That is exactly what happened to Sherry Emerson, who was used to sending text messages to her late grandmother's phone number. Upon sending a text one day, she received a reply that read, quote, "I'm watching over you, you'll get through this, and you'll be alright." Considering the fact that this was 3 years after her grandmother passed away, Sherry was completely shocked that she received a response, and of course she began to freak out. She said, quote, "I felt sick when I read it. I was in shock. I didn't know what to think. I'd sent a message on Wednesday night telling her about family life, and then I got the reply on Thursday. Obviously we know that Nan wasn't going to ever reply. It was just something that we did to comfort for ourselves because she loved to text. So you can imagine what I was thinking seeing a message flash up from her." She then called the number and the person on the other line answered and they confessed. As it turns out, rather than some sort of message from the other side, it just turns out that the phone number that Sherry's grandmother had previously had been given to another customer after it hadn't been used in 3 years. In our number 5 spot today we have the music. This story starts off with the storyteller explaining to us that his grandfather, who was born in the 1920s, had recently passed away. The day of his passing, the storyteller's mom, so the late grandfather's daughter, tried to call her husband. When she called though, and the other line picked up, all she heard was music. It was old music, like from the 40s or 50s, and although this storyteller is from Belgium, the music had an English-speaking singer, and the sound was gritty, almost like it was being played off of a record player. This was quite significant because the family knew that the grandfather had a record player that was quite important to him. The two of them listened to the music for a few seconds before hanging up to try calling again. This time, the call went through, and her husband was on the other line. They end off the story by saying, quote, "We never had a similar problem with our cell phones before, and we both saw on the cell phone screen my dad's number was being called." What do you guys think? A technical error is most likely in my opinion, but the fact that it never happened before, the weird choice of music, and the day it happened on gives me doubts. So I pass the question on to you guys. What do you think happened here? In our number 4 spot today we have The Whisper. So this is a story that comes from someone who goes by the username Juby Love, and it doesn't start off with someone close to Juby passing away or anything like that. It simply just starts off with them trying to get a hold of their mother. They say, quote, "I called her cell and it picked up after the first ring. At first it just sounds like static. I kept saying hello, expecting a reply, but there was nothing. After a few hellos I realized it sounded like someone whispering. I said hello again, waiting for a reply, thinking it was the radio in her car. Still no reply. The whispering got louder. It sounded like a woman whispering 'help me' repeatedly. This freaked me out. I thought maybe they got in an accident and my mom was pinned or badly hurt and couldn't speak, so I am freaking out. I hung up and kept calling back. A few calls later, my mom answered. She swore she never picked up because she had no service until that point. I'm still a little spooked." Honestly, I wouldn't even know what to make of that. Was someone from the other side trying to contact them? Was it some sort of glitch in the Matrix? At this point, it remains one creepy mystery. In our number 3 spot today we have The Medium. This story comes from someone online who goes by the name I Want to Believe, and they talk about how they started getting signs from their friend who had recently passed away. They explained that the signs came in the form of their favorite songs playing on the radio, despite them not being songs that would normally air. There were things in the house, like this example they explain, quote, "He used to put pennies on heads in the corners of his room as a silly good luck thing. I started finding pennies on heads in the corners of my room." They go on to tell us that they started seeing a therapist to help them navigate their grief, and this therapist referred them to a medium. They explain their experience at the medium by saying, quote, "He said my friend had come through to speak to me. I knew it was my friend coming through because the medium told me things about him that no one could know or research, including very private things about how he was found, etc. He told me that he loved me and would be around for me and help me with my struggles. The medium told me that he plays songs on the radio for me, which I noticed before I even went to the medium. The medium even said that my friend knows I have noticed the things he does for me." In our number 2 spot today we have Two Dreams. This story comes from someone who goes by the username Dugans, and they wrote, quote, "When my grandfather passed away, my mother and I just moved into our new home. Within a week of his passing, I had a dream that the phone rings and it's him on the other line. He says, 'Hey Heather, do you know who this is?' I didn't know what to say because it sounded like him, but I knew in my dream that he had passed away. He just laughs and says, 'I don't have much time. Can I speak to your mom?' And I say, 'Of course,' and run into the room to give my mom the phone, but I dropped it and it got disconnected. The next day I tell my mom about it and she gets a serious look and tells me that he called her in her dream and said, 'I don't have much time, I need you to turn off Heather's heater.' She wakes up and goes into my room and the heater is shooting flames out of it. The heater was an old plug-in one that was his, and I used it every night, pointing it at my bed when I went to sleep." In our number 1 spot today we have Wednesday. This story is from someone who goes by the username Summerfield85, and they say, quote, "My mom passed away on a Tuesday. On Wednesday I was home alone when the phone rang. When I picked up the phone I distinctly heard my mom's voice saying, 'Lo? Lo?' I said, 'Mom?' Then they disconnected. Lo is a nickname that my mom used for me. She was the only person who called me that, and it was very definitely in her New York accent, her timbre, her voice. There were other phenomena in the 2 weeks following. Items related to my mom flew across the room twice. One of those, a bracelet, happened in front of 2 people. Honestly, I wouldn't know what to make of that. Part of it I feel like would be so comforting, but like part of that would be absolutely terrible. Like great, now my mom's not grounding me, she's just my poltergeist.
Dead girlfriend's Facebook message comes onto this list at number 10. This story comes to us from Reddit. Nathan says that his girlfriend Emily died in a tragic car accident back in 2012. Approximately 1 year later, Emily returned from the dead to communicate with Nathan through Facebook. Is this real life right now? According to Nathan, only him and Emily's mom have access to her Facebook. Take a look for yourself. Here are some screenshots of the Facebook messages sent from beyond the grave. If that wasn't creepy enough, Emily started to tag herself in photos in the background. But wait, there's more. Emily even took a picture of Nathan and sent it to him. I don't know about you guys, but I'm thinking Nathan wasn't the greatest boyfriend, and she should probably deactivate his Facebook account because this is just way too much to handle.
In our 9th spot, we have the Weeping Woman. Legend goes that a woman named Charlotte M. Sitton haunts the Adelaida Cemetery in California. Apparently, back in the day, Charlotte lost both of her children due to an epidemic. Being so distraught over her loss, she ended up taking her own life to be with her children once again. According to locals, she hung herself by the local school. Now her soul is restless. She hasn't been able to find peace since. It's said that every Friday between 10 to 11:30 p.m., Charlotte appears by her children's grave. You can see her lurking about in a white dress, placing flowers down on her children's graves before heading out into the woods. Coming in at number 8, we have the Bleeding Headstone. The Union Cemetery in Pennsylvania is known to be a pretty haunted one. There's apparently a woman in white that lurks the area, and of course, a headstone that bleeds. The grave belongs to 19th century local William Musser. His relatives tried to replace the tombstone a number of times, but no matter what, blood always seems to continue seeping out of it. Turns out that William was stabbed and bled to death. In fact, on a number of occasions, a knife has appeared on the tombstone. Coming in at number 7, we have the Crypt Keeper. Imagine having a full-on mausoleum for when you die. You're either super rich or super important or both if that happens. Anyways, located in the West Edmiston Cemetery in New York, there's a mausoleum for a woman named Eunice Welch. She died in 1922 while in her 70s due to natural causes. Nothing too eerie or unusual there. But what is spooky is the fact that her mausoleum is home to an undead Crypt Keeper. Apparently, if you knock on the door and wait, you'll hear some rustling from inside. After a few moments, someone will knock back. But if the Crypt Keeper is in a bad mood, he might yell at you to leave. A number of people have done this and have heard his eerie voice talk back to them. Now, you might be wondering, who is this guy that's haunting the mausoleum of this innocent woman? Well, turns out that the mausoleum used to store dead bodies in there during the winter. There wasn't enough storage elsewhere, so they placed the bodies there until the ground thawed so that they could be buried. So it's believed that maybe one of the bodies that was placed there latched onto the area and is now haunting it. In our 6th spot, we have the Black Angel. Now, this one has to be the weirdest one on this whole list. But there's a Black Angel statue located in Fairview Cemetery in Council Bluffs, Iowa, that comes alive at night. Yes, you heard me. Apparently, this statue comes alive at night and flies around the grave. And you don't want to be anywhere near it when it happens, because the legend continues on saying that the statue has been known to shoot fire from its eyes. Those hit by the eye beam will disappear forever. In fact, the statue apparently wasn't always black, but it turned black around the same time that it came alive. So some say that it absorbed the evil from the people buried around it, and the evil caused it to change color. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Black Agnes. In 1899, a wealthy businessman named John Hubbard passed away. But before he did, he had a copper sculpture made to be placed near his grave. The sculpture is of a bare individual draped in cloth with their head tilted upwards. It is said to be of Thanatos. Thanatos in Greek mythology was the personification of death, so kind of fitting. The statue is located in Greenmont Cemetery in Vermont, and of course, it's haunted. Apparently, some have seen its eyes glow red in the middle of the night. Others have heard blood-curdling screams come from her. But the scariest thing is that she has killed a number of people. Apparently, if you sit on her lap, death will befall you within 7 days. So whatever you do not pop a squat on her lap. Moving on to number 4, we have Smiley's grave. In Garland, Texas, there is a single plot for an entire family that all died on the same day. They are known as the Smiley family. You have the mother, Belle Hall, the father, Chas Smiley, and daughters Lilith Merle, Greta May, and Charlena. Turns out that on May 9th of 1927, the dad, Chas Smiley, took the lives of his wife and 3 daughters while in a fit of rage. After he calmed down and realized what he had done, he took his own life by hanging. Rumor has it that if you lay down on the grave at midnight and try to get back up, you won't be able to. That's because the ghost of Chas Smiley has got you and is trying to pull you down to hell with him. Coming in at number 3, we have Cornelius Vanderbilt. In the 19th century, businessman Cornelius Vanderbilt was one of the richest Americans. As a result, he was laid to rest in a 3-story mausoleum. Now his tomb was something else. It was massive, but also decorated like a Romanesque church in France. But it's also incredibly haunted. A number of people have reported different spooky encounters there. First, we have a female figure that likes to hover around the tomb. Apparently, a woman died nearby after a heavy iron door fell on her. So people think that the ghostly figure they have seen is her. Other people have seen like bright light orbs in the area. And some have seen Cornelius himself. If you try to trespass into the tomb, apparently he will appear in a gray suit and chase you away. And lastly, some visitors claim that when they have taken photos of outside of the mausoleum, that they later found a figure lurking in the back of the photo. Moving on to number 2, we have Pinewoods Cemetery. Pinewoods Cemetery in New York is now abandoned, but the spooky legends associated with it still live on. In fact, to this day, taxi drivers hate driving past it. That's because a number of them have seen terrifying things while doing so late at night. Apparently, a number of drivers have picked up passengers nearby heading home. However, while en route, a number of them just vanish from the backseat of the cab into thin air. How eerie. The cemetery is also said to be home of an angel statue that bleeds from its neck. And there's a crumbling mausoleum where people have seen a strange green glowing light orb floating about, right where the coffins used to be. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the vampire grave. Now this is probably one of the creepiest legends out there. So apparently in Lafayette, Colorado, there's this weird grave with the words "Born in Transylvania" etched on it. Local legends say that the grave site belongs to a real-life vampire. In fact, there's a tree growing right on the grave. Legend goes that this tree grew from the stake that killed the vampire. To make things weirder and creepier, sometimes people have seen a tall, slender man in a dark coat with black hair and long fingernails lurking around the grave. Sounds like he's a vampire, maybe mourning the loss of his vampire friend, I don't know. Some have reported him actually sitting on the tombstone itself. And one time, a police chief patrolling the area found a doll with pins stuck through its heart left on top of the grave. Nowadays, it's a popular ghost attraction. People love to go check out the vampire's grave with hopes to get a glimpse of this eerie vampire man.